Hello everyone. Today we will try to understand Indian Council Act 1909. So in this lecture we will just try to understand what was the background for this act, why British Parliament had enacted Indian Council Act 1909. In the later lecture we will try to understand what was the provisions of this act, and then we will try to analyze those provisions. But in the later lecture, today lecture, we will just try to understand why British Parliament had enacted Indian Council Act 1909. It was also known as Morley Minto Reform 1909, because Lord Minto was the viceroy from 1905 to 1910 after the viceroy Lord Curzon, and Morley was the Secretary of State for India. Secretary of State, India. So that's why this Indian Council Act was also known as the Morley Minto Reform 1909. So first we will try to understand why British Parliament had enacted Indian Council Act 1909. What was the background for this act? As you know, during the decade of 1960, 70s and 80s, nationalism was growing. As I had told you about the how nationalism grew in early lectures, especially in the region of Bombay, Bengal, and Madras, it was growing. Means people of this area had started developing a sense of togetherness. As time passes, in the early 20th century, during the 1900 onward, what people had started doing that they were involved anti-British activities. As you know, Swadeshi movement, many anti-British activities were going on. Due to many British policies, oppressive law, these anti-British activities was in rise, especially in these regions. Government was obviously concerned about these anti-British activities. So, in order to please these peoples, like they should avoid doing anti-British activities, government was concerned. To government was thinking that there should be some changes, there should be some thing, there should some law should be passed in order to please these people who are involved in anti-British activities, especially the moderate leaders. This is your first background because of anti-British activities. Second thing we will try to understand that a delegates of Muslim leaders led by the Aga Khan meet Lord Minto, second 1905 to 10 in Simla, and these peoples were demanding separate representation of Muslim in legislative councils. So these peoples were also demanding that government should give separate representation to the Muslim in the legislative council, in the imperial legislative council. So because of these two background, government think tank was thinking that there should be some reform which should given to these peoples to please them. And in this background, Morley and Minto suggested some reform to the government. To the government, and British Parliament enacted those reform as the Indian Council Act 1909. So this was the background for the Indian Council Act 1909, which is also known as the Morley-Minto reform, because of Lord Minto was the viceroy of that period and Morley was the Secretary of State of India for India at that period. So this Indian Council Act 1909 was also known as the Morley-Minto reform. So I hope you are getting the background, and later lecture we will try to understand what was the provision of these act and we will try to analyze those provisions. Thank you for watching.